Vice Mayor Flagger of Los Altos. Welcome to the Cities Association of Santa Clara County interview with Assemblymember Evan Lowe. If you're not familiar with the Cities Association, it consists of the 15 cities in Santa Clara County and the elected representatives of more than 1.9 million Bay Area residents. Since 1990, these representatives have been successfully collaborating to discuss and find consensus and solutions for regional issues to best serve the community. Our mission is to strive for a unified voice to support our diverse cities and constituents. Our cities range from a few thousand people to a city of over 1 million people. Today, we are continuing our conversation with our state representatives. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have Assemblymember Evan Lowe with us. We also have President Klein of the Cities Association, who's also Mayor of Sunnyvale, joining us. And I do want to invite him as I have this Zoom side chat and conversation with Assemblymember Lowe to please chime in. If you have a follow-up question, let us know. I do want this to be as casual and informal as possible, even knowing that it's being recorded. So thank you so much, Assemblymember Lowe, for joining us this afternoon.
It's great to see all of you.
Thank you. Let me do a brief introduction of Assemblymember Lowe. I'm sure everybody watching this is already familiar with him and the great work he's been doing locally and in Sacramento for the past, several years. He was elected to the California State Assembly in November 2014 to represent District 28. At the age of 31, Assemblymember Lowe became the youngest Asian American legislator to have been elected to the Assembly in state history. The district is located in Silicon Valley and includes Campbell, Cupertino, Los Gatos, Montessorino, Saratoga, and the areas of West San Jose, Willow Glen, and Almaden Valley in San Jose. Assemblymember Lowe chairs the Business and Professions Committee. In 2015, together with Assemblymember Ian Calderon, he launched the first in the state California Legislative Technology and Innovation Caucus. So we'll have a lot of questions later on related to technology and innovation for Assemblymember Lowe. The caucus comprises of a bipartisan group of senators and assembly members who view this as a statewide effort to ensure that California and Silicon Valley remains the global leader in technology and innovation. In 2010, Assemblymember Lowe also made history by becoming the youngest openly LGBT mayor in the country at the age of 26. While serving on Campbell City Council, he helped balance the city budget while eliminating vital services and increase government transparency by streaming city council meetings online, which we're all doing now, even if we didn't have that set up before. So you had that foresight. So thank you for starting that. I'm sure you made it easy for many of us, and definitely Campbell, because they were way ahead of everybody else. So thank you. So Assemblymember Lowe, as I said, I have different questions I want us to talk about this afternoon. I do want it to be very informal, and so we're going to start it off with a very easy question. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you using to escape all the different things that are happening around our nation today?
Well, first of all, let me just say it's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you very much for your service, Vice Mayor, in the city of Los Altos, as well as our Mayor of Sunnyvale, home to where my father is as well, who Mayor Klein is very responsive to constituent services, because we all have that family member who'll say, he'll contact you on every little thing. And of course, that is my father, who of course will ping me and text me about every dang thing about some park and everything. So I thank you, Mayor, for also indulging in being as responsive to your constituents as well. So to both of you, thank you for your leadership at the Cities Association.
Thank you.
Thanks, Evan.
Yes.
So what are you reading or watching? You can answer both or pick one.
Yes, well, we are in government right now, and we are still dealing with the COVID crisis in the state. So I must admit that it is not fun or sexy, but it is that of a state budget and the number of the bills that'll be coming forth, because we have the benefit of having some time to put the due diligence on that. That's in terms of reading. But I will say the guilty pleasure is, of course, the TikTok and Instagram watching. As I have stairs at my place, and so because we don't have any outdoor kind of gyms, I'll just go up and down my stairs while looking and mindlessly at TikTok and Instagram. Right.
Have you created your own TikTok video yet?
Oh no, I'm not that brave. I'm not that brave. I'm not that brave, but I just want to know what the cool kids are watching. So that's why I do watch.
Well, I think you're cool just by watching it. I don't even watch TikTok videos, but that does sound like fun. Have you acquired any COVID-related skills? You know, we hear a lot of people saying, you know, they've taken the time to learn to bake or ride a bike or do something, you know, they've always wanted to do that they just haven't had the time to do.
Well, let me tell you, I very much value the lost art of handwritten notes. And so I have taken some time to get reacquainted with that pen and paper and write notes to people, just checking in on them and wishing them all the best and communicating, making sure that they are doing well. And if they need anything, to let me know if they need anything. But I think, as we all know, the younger generations might not be familiar with what a stamp is, or even what the cost of a stamp is these days. I am frankly not quite sure, because I have forever stamps. So I bought quite a bit of them in bulk. But nonetheless, that is the lost art. And I encourage so many of us to reconnect with people in the most meaningful ways.
Oh, that's beautiful. I really appreciate you saying that. And I was remiss. I really should have started out asking, how are you doing?
Vice Mayor Flagler, thank you very much. You're kind. I'll say that this is the time to which people need people like you, like Mayor Klein, public servants, to help serve when people most need it. And we realize that the safety net is so fragile, and our society and democracy requires us to continually invest in it. So for us to be in these capacities, to have the privilege to serve, is of utmost importance. But I'll also say it also does come with particular peril. At the same time, this is a much more challenging time given the issues of social unrest with respect to racial injustice, to the healthcare crisis, that of the COVID pandemic, and also just the basics of the economy. And so how, as public servants, do we do our jobs in an intentional way to the best of our abilities, while also recognizing that it does come with specific hazards? In fact, as I mentioned earlier, that there are approximately 3 or so legislators that tested positive for COVID, even though we have abided by the distancing and protocol requirements. So it does come with peril, but again, the people really need us, and I hope that we can continue to serve to the best extent possible. Maybe we get lost again.
I think we lost her again. Does she know she's lost? Okay, maybe she'll pop back on.
I would hang up on me too if I talked this much.
Increased dramatically in the last 4 months, as far as people wanting to get reasonable information and all that, which has been positive.
Yeah. I understood. Well, thank you for serving. And I'm sure that to do things in a very different way. I just recall back to my council days when the job was it's just different time now, to which things seems to be unfortunately so divided, and to which now is just I try to put my finger on it to best understand and assess what that is, but I don't know. Do you have any ideas on what that is?
I think part of it is just from a resident standpoint. There's fatigue of the shelter in place, and now it's and I'm hearing contentious response that people either want to open up completely, or how dare you open up because you're putting my life in danger. And you see that throughout our community right now, and it's the reality is somewhere in between.
Yes.
But people, this is touching people, at their heart at the end of the day, because you're talking about their lives and
Right.
their way of their quality of life and their way of being. And so definitely, it's a difficult time for many, and trying to, be the sane voice, saying we'll get through this, is really appreciated by the residents and your father, for that matter.
Yes. Yeah, the polarization can be difficult. So I appreciate you having being in that position so that just calm heads prevail.
No, thank you, President Klein, for filling in there. And I'm so sorry, this did not happen with Senator Hill earlier today. Maybe it's the Los Altos afternoon load that exists. But I will segue, based on what you were discussing with President Klein, to the impact of COVID. As both of you were saying, it touches everything and people respond to it in different ways. I'm curious now, talking about the work that you're doing and your colleagues are doing in Sacramento, how has COVID impacted both your sessions, so the process, the work that needs to get done, but also your priorities, because your time is now compressed, and we now have police reform, social justice, COVID, the economy. There's so many things all happening at the same time. So Assemblymember Lowe, can you talk about how those things all happening at the same time have impacted the process and also the priorities?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm sure you can appreciate and imagine the difficulties just on the functionality of the basics, and yet the essential service that government must continually function. But I'll say, just in terms of practice, most of us eliminated close to 90% of the bills that we initially introduced earlier in January. And in fact, we have not even had an opportunity to see our own staff members. So we've been working remotely. In addition, we are also met with the conundrum, which is, how do we function as a body? And yet, constitutionally, there might be some challenges with respect to remote voting. And so because of the uncertainty therein lies part of the challenge that exists, which is to say that we must continually function, but at less capacity. And frankly, much of it is in person because of the assessment on the constitutionality on whether or not we can work remotely and vote remotely, which is of particular conflict. So there lies the realities that we're dealt with.
Yeah. And, we don't know what the future holds, so I'm sure that is a future consideration for Sacramento to see whether or not, and, I know what's entailed in trying to make such a big change to the Constitution. But, this was a learning for so many of us. At the local level, we were able to transition to Zoom meetings. There are pros and cons to everything, but I agree with you 100%. So still focused on the work you're doing in Sacramento. I know there are hundreds of bills being discussed right now in committee on the Senate side, but then also on the Assembly side. What lens are you viewing these bills through in order to move the bills forward that I think, or the community may believe that we need this year? I can't imagine that process, but I would love to hear you talk about the lens you're looking through and how you're, deciding which bills you're going to champion and support going through.
Yes, I think similarly, we wanted to be mindful of the realities that were dealt with respect to the immediate needs. So therefore, for example, a bill that I previously introduced earlier this year on universal basic income, we had to sort of pause on our ambition because of the fact that we want to deal with the realities. And so the realities that I'm dealing with now are with respect to some of the COVID-related items. So for example, some of these nursing students who are just about to graduate, and we really need them in the field, in the front lines, but yet they were not able to get their clinical hours because of the COVID-related pandemic. So do we find auxiliary? Do we find some sort of other type of training for them, a type of simulation upon graduation? And what does that mean? How do we ensure that it's not subpar work? So these are the type of things that we're just trying to deal with right now on the real time in addressing the issues of everyday people. And let me also just say, we had almost no one on California unemployment with respect to the numbers now. close to 5 million Californians within just a 4-month period of time utilizing the unemployment insurance program. So this is of significant need. The system has been overwhelmed, but we must utilize technology to be effective and for us to be there when the people need it the most.
Right. On the Assembly side, so when you think of the millions of people right now who have filed for unemployment, you think about the homeless population, some are being moved to hotels, which is temporary. You know, housing construction was put on hold for several weeks. How is the Assembly looking? And we already had a housing crisis even before COVID. What are the solutions or the bills that are being considered that you think go to the heart of this issue that's just waiting?
With respect to the housing crisis? Or
the housing crisis, but the numbers of people filing for unemployment, so there's no income. You know, we have the rent eviction. I mean, that's, I think, got extended through August 31st. You know, do we look to extend that? What are the different solutions we need to start considering either locally or at your level to get ahead of the impact these things could have on our communities and further the housing crisis?
That's a very comprehensive question, so I appreciate that. Let us just talk to some specific facts for foundational understanding. The state cannot go bankrupt, and we're constitutionally required to balance a budget, whereas, as you know, cities are able to go bankrupt. Of course, many mitigations to prevent such an occurrence to happen. But what we really need is us, the call to action for our federal representatives to help support states in this need. We saw that the federal administration overnight, close to $4 trillion to address this issue of the stimulus and the COVID-related impact. So we really need the support from the federal administration to support not only the state, but the locals, because when we think about the state, $54 billion in cuts, and yet the cities are going to be saying, state, please do us no harm. We are constitutionally required to balance a budget. So there lies, I think, the challenge that exists. But again, with respect to housing, it's important that we look at this at a wider lens with respect to how has this COVID pandemic hit the pocketbooks of the state, the local jurisdictions, and then the impact to housing, healthcare, and transportation and jobs. So this holistic approach is very important. And previously, we would look at bills that are just in isolation, this bill for housing, this bill for, but it's important that we look at a comprehensive approach, and that's what we're working with the administration on via his executive orders and the work that the legislature needs to do to codify and make this long-term.
Right. Oh, great. And we were talking to Senator Hill earlier on the Senate side. He mentioned they're, you know, basically packaging a series of housing bills. And I'm sure you're familiar with the package. I have the list of the different bills, and I don't know if there are particular ones that you want to speak to that you think the Cities Association, it would be good for us to know about these bills, possibly get more involved, and why you think it would benefit our community to support these housing bills. I'm sure you've seen our letters. I'm sure you've heard from your constituents. You know, I think Andy, or the planning collaborative that was put together for Santa Clara County, you know, one of the surprising elements, you know, of their review is the fact that we're all elected by the same electorate, same constituents. But when you look at the positions, they're all different all over the place on housing. And, you know, I do not envy your position. But, you know, can you talk about the different housing bills? You know, the concerns of many residents. You know, we say, and you know, I know I do, and I know many others, we support increasing the housing supply, we support increasing affordable homes. But with these housing bills and the opposition that you're hearing, what do you think we need to understand? Are there any of these, either on the Senate side or Assembly side, that you're championing, supporting, elements you like about them that we should be aware of?
Yeah, thank you. Well, just one in particular that I know it seems to be a no-brainer, which is with respect to seamless transit principles. And that's, I believe, SB 378. All these numbers sort of just come all together to me. if I got them wrong. And that's in the Senate side. But what I think is important is that you similarly have a challenging job as well, too, of competing interests. So what is so important is that we just realize that we're all in this together. We will not agree on 100% of the things, but it does not mean that we demonize it and we see a polarization in our communities. oftentimes talk about this with my mother who lives in Almaden Valley in San Jose. And when I come home for dinner and have good conversations with her, we disagree about all kinds of things. Let me tell you, if you were flying on the wall.
I understand.
Yeah, yes, right now. I'm sure we all have those similar conversations with that. But we still love our family, and we will see each other and break bread. So I just hope that we can recognize that we might have different vantage points, but we are genuine in our desire to do the best that we possibly can based on the information that we were given.
And based on the pushback that I'm sure you're very familiar with related to SB 50, is there one thing that you would advocate to ensure is included in the housing bills that are moving forward today? That you learned from the SB 50 process saying, you know what, we should rethink that and make sure these new housing bills factor in that concern I kept hearing from my constituents?
Yeah, well, I think it's important that we incentivize cities, we allow, instead of just the stick, so much of it is, well, how do we focus on allowing the plans to incentivize private developers accordingly, and or these public-private partnerships. So we cannot just continually bash cities, but rather let's look at it from a collaborative approach as well. And similarly, when you talked about not all cities are the same within the cities association or even with the state, much less my district, in which I have the big fish of San Jose, 2/3 of it, but then I also have very much suburban bedroom communities of Saratoga, Monte Sereno, Los Gatos, Campbell, and Cupertino as well. So therein lies, I think, a wider conversation to say, where's the collaboration? And by the way, how do we also incentivize all across the board, not just focus on cities, but also the development community as well with incentives?
And, you know, I'm chair of the Cities Association Legislative Action Committee, and I would say 9 out of the 10 bills that we consider each month have to do with housing. And Larry, who is the president, he sits in on those meetings. So before I move from housing bills, which dominate a lot of our conversation and work, I do want to check in with Larry to see if he has any specific questions related to housing bills.
Sure, and not specific to the housing bills, but I think, you know, exactly what you said, Evan, as far as we have different communities here, but a lot of it is that partnership and financing. You know, if you go back several RENA periods, you know, one of the shocking things is, well, we weren't, you know, if we go back 3 cycles, we weren't meeting our numbers, but we were actually getting very close as far as the number of low-income housing that was being built. And a lot of that had to do with, you know, redevelopment dollars that cities had to spend on housing that have now, you know, disappeared. And as much as, you know, all of our cities are trying to do the right thing as far as zoning is concerned. You know, if it doesn't pencil out for a developer, they're not going to build very low and low income housing and focus on market rate or conceivably moderate. And those are usually the ones that our cities have easier times building. But, you know, ultimately the cities themselves are in charge of very few actual developments of housing. You know, we fund, you know, affordable housing nonprofits and all that. And just, you know, from a financing standpoint, do you see any bills that are looking to solve that problem and what their state might be?
Yeah, you know, again, because we've had to tamper down some of the ambitions we had, given the $54 billion in cuts that we need to make for the state, it appears that much of on the incentive side has been paused for the time being, but nonetheless, the comprehensive approach in addressing housing, I think, is very important for us to do. And I mean, you know this, you're on the ground and you see it each and every day. So we very much would rely on your expertise to help advocate for these positions. Similarly, I do think it is important, and it's not a very popular conversation, but I do think it's important that we reevaluate also the tax structure and the tax code with respect to public financing of how the state, for example, cities and states and counties receive revenues. We're losing so much on the goods and services that we used to be predominantly manufacturing, but now much of it is goods and services. We're losing on so much of these revenues, and whether or not we look at incentivization about how cities are developed. Some would argue that many cities would just focus on the commercial side because of the tax generation and less on the residential because it's not as profitable. But perhaps we can reevaluate some of the notions of tax structures, and it's something that I want to make sure that we at least have a conversation about as well.
Yeah. And the Cities Association, thanks for that question, Larry. The Cities Association sent a letter, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, supporting SB 795, which is Senator Bell's bill, which goes to that specific purpose of providing funding for housing. I'm not very optimistic because of what's going on right now with the budget, but we did send in our letter of support, and we hope that it will, get pushed through, but we will see. You mentioned arena, and another hat I wear. I am the Cities Association. I know, Evan,
Wow.
you understand. We all wear many hats. I represent the Cities Association on the ABAG Arena Committee. And so we just got our big number. I'm sure you heard it. It's, over 440,000 units to be built in the 9 Bay Area counties. We're working on the methodology currently, how we're going to distribute and allocate that big number. And one of the big asks from constituents and cities and even members of ABAG has been to the HCD to postpone this process. As you know, COVID, and you talked to this just now as well, where COVID has impacted so many things, including how we do business, how we work, how we commute, all factors that are relevant in figuring out how we allocate this big number. And so because we don't know what the reality will be next year, should we put this process on hold until we have a better idea of what the new normal reality would be before we continue this process based on data that was based on the pre-COVID data. So what are your thoughts on that, trying to lobby the HCD to postpone this arena process until we have more data and a better understanding of how COVID has impacted this process?
Well, I think it is absolutely appropriate that we take a look at assessments based on facts and data to best determine the direction that we wish to head in. And certainly by no means is there a desire for the state to penalize by no fault of their own for the cities of things that have been out of the control of so many people. So we've seen this in many different areas, and I'd encourage the Cities Association to support and lobby that of the administration and HCD to do so, because a number of sectors are advocating for these accommodations in a wide variety of different ways. And I think it's entirely appropriate for the question to be asked and to advocate accordingly.
Great. Thanks, Evan. I'm going to transition to social justice, police reform. You touched on that at the beginning, and it's happening nationally, it's happening locally, it's happening globally, where I think, since the George Floyd murder, a lot of people are more in touch, aware, wanting to do something about the social injustice that has been impacting the Black communities for decades. And so we have this movement, and a lot of people look at it and say, it looks different, it feels different. And they're really hoping, because of all those things, that we'll actually get some real long-lasting results from this movement, positive results. Are there bills that you're working on or you're aware of that you plan to support that address this issue?
Thank you. This notion about the unconditional allyship that is so important for us to demonstrate is front and center. Mm-hmm. So the issue that I do want to address is the notion of Proposition 16, which is that of to repeal Proposition 209, which was passed in 1996. This is essentially affirmative action. Yep. And the voters in California will have an opportunity to help rectify the systemic inequities in society to allow for sex and race to be considerable factors with respect to a number of different areas, including government contracting and higher education admissions. It's important that we collectively work to address these issues so that we can have the diverse society that we want to see, while also helping empower and addressing the past inequities. So we must do so collectively, but at the same time, this is a conversation about race and power, and frankly, one that is of particular conflict within my own Asian Pacific Islander community. But I hope that even speaking on my own community, that we demonstrate that allyship. I received a number of threats of recall and protests outside my office because of my support of the repeal of Prop 209 in support then of affirmative action. But I do believe it is important that we have conversations about this, about race, and not only just in the areas of higher education or public safety, but within the issues of healthcare. We know that COVID has disproportionately hurt brown and Black communities, and the issues of housing. Same thing. All the data that we have, every possible graph and survey shows us the same data. So we already know this. So why are we not addressing it and taking it head on? So that's why I think it's important. It's our obligation. It's front and center. Let's tackle it in a wide variety of different ways.
And let me just thank you for your leadership, because I read about, your support and what you've been going through, and especially in times like this. And to really get systemic change, you need strong leadership. And so I really want to recognize and thank you for that. I mean it. Really appreciate that. And, when at the local level, and Larry knows this as well, we're trying to make changes at the local level, whether it's, looking at or PD or police department budgets, seeing whether or not we need to improve our policies and procedures related to use of force. The 8 can't wait. I'm sure you're familiar with all those things. But as you said, each stakeholder has a different role to play. And to really get systemic change, we all have to be doing something. Because even if at the local level we do something and we don't have things being done in Sacramento, then it will hit a roadblock. And so I'm very happy to hear that, even with COVID, there's been real leadership in recognizing the police, the social injustice, the police reform calls, and doing something about it. So really want to thank you on that, and let us know as a cities association if what we can do to help. We've already adopted a resolution, but anything that we can help you at the Sacramento level, please let us know.
Oh, great. City Association already passed a resolution in support of Proposition 16?
No, supporting Black Lives Matter. But if that's something, but Evan, now is the opportunity. At the end, I was going to ask, so you can start thinking about what your ask of us is, but that was going to be one of my last questions. How can we support you to support bills that benefit our community? Let me quickly transition, though, to technology and innovation in Silicon Valley. And I work for HP, so I also work in the tech sector. And one of the things, I have a couple questions on tech. So one of the things we learned during, this crisis, and we're still learning, is the fact that even in Silicon Valley, there are many kids, many families who do not have access to devices or have internet connection to do the work they needed to do when we switched 100% to shelter in place and kids had to do school at home. It's shocking. I don't have the data in front of me, but I've seen it. It is shocking and sad that in Silicon Valley, so can you imagine the rest of the country, the rest of the state? Are there things that you're championing either on your committee, in the assembly, to help address this big issue? Because as you know, going into the fall, all schools currently will have a 100% virtual plan. Even if they have a blended or a hybrid or a 100% return to school, they're all still having the option of 100% virtual for families who do not feel comfortable sending their kids to school. And we don't want the families who, because they can't afford the device or because they don't have the internet access, to be forced to go to school if that's not what they really want in the best interest of their family.
Yeah, well, you're addressing, but the notion that you're addressing, if I best understand correctly, is that of the digital divide as well.
Yes.
With respect to those that have and those that are not. Clearly, we are in the heart of Silicon Valley. We are Silicon Valley. So my dear friends tell me this all the time. Other legislators representing rural areas and rural communities, many a times tell me the same thing. That they do not have that luxury and they'd be happy to just get streaming or do Netflix or whatever this might be. So it's absolutely imperative that we recognize the inequity with respect to not everyone having the same level playing field and addressing that importantly so. Let me also just say that I think it's important that we utilize our friends in the private sector who have the technologies to help us implement accordingly. There also is a conundrum with this too, which is to say this. The issue of cell sites, cell towers, is not very popular in the adjacent communities.
I am very familiar.
But at the same time, our residents are demanding to be able to send emails and watch 3 movies at the same time for each of their 5 family members.
Oh,
So
I know, yeah.
how, you know what I'm saying. So it's important that we speak truths, that when we talk about infrastructure, that we must build it appropriately. We must do so with public safety and public health in mind, but also talk about what is required for the expectation to utilize the technologies to educate and inform our younger populations as well.
Great. Thanks for that, Evan. And then still on the tech sector, I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on what the role of the Silicon Valley companies should be? And it's everything. It's because personally, this is not the view of the Citizens Association. I think they can play it. I actually said it on the RENA committee meeting yesterday that they're missing from the table. Because when you think of housing, when you think of the digital divide, when you think of social injustice, to me, all these issues can be addressed and escalated and funded. Like, there are different roles tech companies can play. And I'm just curious, have you reached out? So there are things you're doing in Sacramento, but I'm sure you also have your contacts at the different tech companies. Are you talking with them, working with them to help us as a community address these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. But we should also give kudos when kudos is due to companies like Facebook, Cisco, and Google, just to name a few, with respect to the commitments to housing and putting significant resources towards housing and a wide variety of other social inequity issues to address them and tackle them. But similarly, we know that we can expect more from our dear friends and from our dear partners, because they also benefit from the infrastructure of the city. They benefit from the future pipeline of our workforce and our public educational higher institutions, as well as K through 12. So these are all things that we collectively care about. So yes, we have engaged them to this notion, but I think we can do more. And similarly, it is sometimes adversarial, and there might be a little friction, but I think that it's also healthy in a democracy to have conversations about what is the society that we want to see. Vice Mayor, let me just tell you this. When I have companies that are almost the most valuable companies in the world in Silicon Valley, and yet in this Cupertino school district, it's in its 6th year of consecutive cuts. Now, how is that okay? That doesn't make sense. Something ain't right here. So we need to have a calibration about public funding, public financing of our institutions, because that is a statement of values. So we must rectify all of these different issues accordingly.
And we lost her again.
Maybe that's a good close.
Well, I think that we are getting about to that time. But Larry, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Sure. So definitely, I think, are there any bills looking at the digital divide right now and funding? And I know the budget is a big issue, and we just approved the budget, but
she's back.
Definitely,
we'll give you a prize. Yeah, so I will definitely keep you apprised. And keep the City Association apprised, just given our vicinity and given the makeup of, frankly, of our elected representatives who also moonlight as well in the tech sector.
Yes, exactly.
and
That's us, Larry.
I hope you took note of how I said that too, because so much of you are putting in this work as full-time, and our citizens are getting such a bang for their buck out of you guys.
Thanks,
I'm not sure all of them would agree, but yes, thank you for saying that. So before I do the big wrap-up question about how can we help you, how can we work together, Larry, was there any other question you wanted to ask?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Go right ahead.
So Assemblymember Lowe, 15 cities, some small, some big, but we care about a lot of the issues you care about. You represent a lot of us. Are there things that you think we can help you with? Are there things you want us to partner with you on that would benefit our community? What do you want our takeaway to be from this discussion?
Yeah, wonderful. Well, just given that we are Silicon Valley, to help effectuate change and advocate to the state in doing more and utilizing the talents and the tapestry of talent of corporations, of people here. in Silicon Valley to support the efforts at the state level, whether or not it be at the California Department of Education's and the Digital Divide Task Force, or whether or not it be to support that of the infrastructure building that we need to do. But finally, let me just close by saying that I'm now approaching my 15th year in public service, as either in public elected life. What I think is so critically important is that we also take a break to ensure that we seek out those individuals who don't think and see the world in the same points of view, but we try to break bread and find some commonality, some common ground. I do this with intention to seek out Republican members from different places throughout the state and or try to visit them in their districts, to which frankly I've not been to previously before my tenure in the legislature. But I think it is important that we understand people and their motivations and who they are, so that when we have tough conversations on policy, we know that there might be a difference of agreement, but yet we know that there is no nefarious nature to this approach, but we have an understanding of who each other are. And then, of course, to try to help them where possible. So how do we help people achieve their goals accordingly? And then respectively, how do they help us achieve our goals as well? But we need to take a pause to be able to do so. And I just encourage us all to do that, especially in these polarized times. People are looking to us for guidance, for leadership as role models. And I hope that we'll emulate that in our day-to-day engagements.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time today. We know you had a busy day, so we appreciate it so much. It was a pleasure. We wish you all the best. Stay safe. I hope you're able to go back into session in 2 weeks and get the good work done. But please stay well. Thank you. All the best. I look forward to working with you in the future, and you will hear from us. By the way, I should ask a quick question. Are the letters effective? If we want to reach you, Assemblymember Lowe, to make you aware of the Cities Association's position on a bill, is the letter the best way to do it?
A letter is good, but then also calling our district staff as well, because what will happen is our district staff members will many a times let us know in real time that an elected member of our community has contacted us. So we very much value your engagement and your precious time, so it would be well recognized.
Thank you. And thanks to your team. Thanks, Andy, for setting this up. Thanks for joining President Klein. Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Thank you, Nisa. Good. Thanks, Evan. Take care.
Okay, good to see you guys.